Welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents, a podcast about role-playing games, their culture, design, and play. Each episode deep dives into one tabletop RPG book, mechanic, or style of game, taking it apart to see how it works and putting it back together to understand how people play it. I'm Ross Payton, joined by Greg Stolze and James Wallace. We've all written for RPGs, published our own games, and have worked in the field for years. You can learn more about us at ludonarrativedissidents.com. Hello, and welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents. This is Season 3, Episode 17, the EABA role-playing game system, which stands for the End-All, Be-All role-playing game system by Greg Porter. This is a curated episode from one of our backers of the Season 3 Kickstarter, Christian Bickley, who also wanted us to talk about the James Bond RPG earlier this season. So again, thank you so much, Christian, for making this possible. We have a lot to talk about because this is a very comprehensive role-playing game system, weighing it at over 320, weighing it in at 320 pages for the PDF. There is a lot to talk about. And of course, with me is always is Greg Stolze and James Wallace to discuss this. And so yes, Greg, please tell us about EABA.
Full disclosure, I know Greg Porter not well, but ran into him every Gen Con, bonded over the Greg thing. And I remember him talking ages ago about the potential of PDFs and hyperlinking it. And, you can make a PDF open another PDF and that, so you can have interdocumentary links, I think. So this is the most thoroughly designed PDF, not from a layout perspective, but from a hidden code doing things perspective.
Yes, this is the EABA 2.0 document, version 2.01, copyright 2013. And there are 14 comments in the PDF talking about all of its many features.
You can click the die graphic in the corner on any page and have it do a dice roller for you, which on one hand, I'm like, I roll my own polyhedrals, but it's such a strange thing to incorporate. From one perspective, it seems like the most obvious that this is a game thing, man. You're going to run it on your laptop or your ThinkPad, and what could be more natural than having a button you push to roll dice? And on the other hand, I'm like, who thinks of putting this in the PDF? Because with my 20th century brain, I'm used to thinking of the game book as a tangible book that you hold and flip through pages and you use the art to navigate it. It's like, oh yeah, the thing about the evisceration maneuver rules was right after it's somewhere in the combat chapter after the big titty chicken chainmail, man. The design of the PDF, the intense desire to make everything functional and a gadget is of a piece with the mechanics of EABA, which similarly have an intense desire to I want to make this gadget. I want to make these mechanics the most useful tool you've ever seen. It's an impulse I can't condemn. Did you notice any other things that it does?
Yeah, James.
Yeah, I was going to say, it says there are automated character sheets, dice rollers, pop-up menus, on-screen mapping, which is interesting because there's a screed towards the end about how mapping and the use of maps actually kind of deadens the roleplay experience, but he's built them into the PDF. This is the most sophisticated PDF I think I've ever accessed. I've never before seen a pop-up button appear over the top of the PDF going, JavaScripts have been loaded. That was completely new to me. And yet at the same time, as you were saying, Greg, it is a book. It's not a hypertext. It's not chapters that exist as separate documents with interlinks. It's you start at the beginning and read through to the end, 20th century style book that happens to be a digital document with all these extra bits. It's like he could have taken the extra step. And I also know Greg largely through contacts at Gen Con. He wrote some stuff for Interactive Fantasy, the magazine about games design I published in the 90s. My interactions with him have been great. He's always been very affable and very amenable company. I've never actually gamed with him. And I've followed a number of his games along the way, from Macho Women with Guns, which I think was late 80s, which was a trilogy of like 32-page RPGs with the kind of, I'm calling them RPGs is almost overstressing it. They are essentially fight systems. They are combat systems. There's Macho Women with Guns, Bat-Winged Bimbos from Hell, and Renegade Nuns on Wheels. And they are gleeful. They are taking the piss out of sexist tropes, essentially, but using it at the same time as an excuse to feature quite a bit of cheesecake artwork. But they are, in game terms, absolutely solid. Very solid, short, not overdeveloped pieces of thoroughly enjoyable, quite silly proto roleplay stuff. And then he's done a number of games. Corpse was another generic system he developed, I think, in the 90s.
Oh,
and
can I?
EABA, yes?
May I clarify that is CORPS, not CORPSE? I remember core. It would be pronounced core, right?
Probably, but I was just going to do a thing about, and BAEA is built on the corpse of Corpse. But that ruined Stolzy.
Sorry, man.
I'm a dad.
I just wanted to help.
Yeah.
There's structural similarities here. There's mechanical similarities to Corpse, but this is a far more developed game in terms of the depth, the complexity of the structure of the whole thing and the underlying mechanic. While I'm yammering, before my Wi-Fi signal decides to flake out again, I wanted a quick word about the title because it's sort of a quote from Shakespeare. It's from Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 7, Line 5, in fact. But it's the one where Macbeth is thinking about should he kill King Duncan. Spoiler, he does. But what he actually says is the be-all and end-all. And that's where the phrase comes from. I believe that's the first occurrence of it written, that we know of in written English. And if you think of it, be-all and end-all is a pretty good name for a role-playing game. Be-all, you could be anyone. End-all, you're going to kill a bunch of stuff. End-all and be-all? Flip it on its head? I don't get it. I'm not sure why he makes that change. And he talks about the title in the prologue, but does not explain why. And that was the first.
Try to pronounce Ba'i. No one wants to play Ba'i.
Yeah,
I think it's a good point. But that was the first of the many questions that I came up against while reading this game, for which, likewise, I did not come up with very many answers.
Yeah, just for clarification on a couple of your points, Macho Women with Guns first came out in 1988, but there's a second edition in 94 and a D20 version, of course, in 2003. Yeah, End All Be All is a fascinating game for me to look at because normally I've seen so many RPG designers when they're starting out, they're like, I'm going to make the D&D killer, or I'm going to make the one RPG that you'll ever need. You'll never need anything else. I see pitches like this and failed Kickstarters and similar campaigns, like at least a couple every year. And my question, and especially like people ask me, like, I want to design the system that does everything. It's like, well, no, that's GURPS and Fate already exist. But like, this is actually, Greg Porter's actually done it. He's actually made a game, I think, that is comparable in terms of competency and complexity to GURPS in terms of mechanics and execution. It can be done, and you wind up with something that's 320 pages of extremely well engineered PDF. Yeah, it's a fascinating exercise in game design.
I did say it, but I'm going to say it again. It's a generic system. This is the core book that we are looking at. It is, I'm not going to say flavorless, but it is without a setting. And it's explicitly without a setting. It's mostly based kind of on human history and possible human future. When it goes into the time zones, we kind of go back to, ancient humans right up to our future humans. But there's I felt there was an unthinking bias there towards humans because, let's be honest, that's what most people are going to play. But beyond that, it does attempt to be remarkably capable without ever going, and now here's the superhero rules and here's the steampunk rules, because those are all in supplements. Those all have their own source books, and it's rulesy. Oh my lord, it's rulesy.
Have we seen a crunchier system? Have we seen a more rules dense system? I mean, Phoenix Command is the famous outlier where it's like, oh yeah, you're going to have to keep track of how much damage has been done to your skin and how much has been done to your muscle tissue and how much has been done to the bone structure.
Well, also Phoenix Command is the one that will you calculate windage when shooting firearms. Also, if you're shooting on a hill, the angle of the hill matters. And if you shoot a shotgun, every single pellet is distributed randomly on your target. So
that is maybe that's crunchier than this.
That was a game by a literal rocket scientist.
Okay, if we exclude that.
The guy went off and joined NASA after leaving the role-play industry. Yeah, this is certainly, I think, the crunchiest game we've looked at in terms of just the density of rules. Everything in here, or almost everything is here, right until you get up to the game mastering section, is rules, essentially.
I would say this is actually comparable to like Ars Magica, because the thing about EABA is that it is a modular system in the regards that like GURPS, you're not supposed to use every single component of the rules at all times. It is a toolkit to design an RPG campaign or one shot based on create a few mechanics. And then you have hundreds of pages of worth of implementations of these mechanics for like vehicles or magic or gunfighting or whatever. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I was thinking of the metaphor for this is you'll see a painting where the background is kind of vague, and then as it gets closer to the golden mean center of the picture, the stuff that's on the spiral towards the focus is more detailed and richer. But the center of it, the thing you're supposed to pay attention to, is the clearest and the most detailed. Down in the corners, it's all just kind of gestural. And I think that's what a lot of game systems do is, I mean, if you look at, I'm trying to think of a particularly rich example. Okay, we'll go with Vampire. You know, the rules for driving a car in Vampire are pretty vague, gestural, because it's not that kind of game. The rules for feeding on people are very specific and detailed because it is that kind of game. I imagine that Werewolf does not use the feeding on people rules from Vampire because werewolves don't have to do that. And so this is a game where instead of having a specific focus, like look at Feng Shui, it's like we are going to mimic Hong Kong action movies well as we can. That's the thing it does. That's the center. That is the sun around which everything orbits. Here's the good example from our oeuvre is Lancer, right? This is the one where they cleanly said, okay, this game is about giant robot fights. Here are the extremely specific, very clearly centered giant robot fight rules. Then over here are the impressionistic everything else rules that are much more vague and hand wavy. And EABA is not like that. It's not saying, here is my focus. It's asking you, what is your focus?
It can't be like that. It's, because it's what is your focus. So it can't have that kind of center. And this is a problem I've had with quite a lot of generic systems. It's certainly a problem I had with GURPS back in the day. And I played GURPS 1 to 3 fairly extensively in the 80s and the 90s. And it's interesting, when we came across Savage Worlds earlier this season, I was expecting more of the same. But Savage Worlds, I think, does have a flavor. It has that heroic adventure within separate genres, but it's always specifically going to be heroic adventure. And that's kind of what it simulates really well. And I was looking for the center of EABA. And because we're storytellers, I think fundamentally the three of us, we're not rules hounds. Fundamentally, we're there for the character and the story. And there's not really an awful lot of thought about, actually, I think Greg has thought about it and has almost consciously either discarded it or, as you say, Greg, pushed it out to the edge and made it a bit hazy, because there are areas where he talks about the narrative and talks about areas of characterization, but they are not codified within the rules and they are not codified on the character sheet. This wonderful digital all singing, all dancing character sheet. There's a bit where you are supposed to, during character generation, you are supposed to talk about, you're supposed to think about motivation. I am checking to see whether that's actually exactly the right word.
Motivations, page 3.35.
Motivation, specifically, yes. 3.35. All adventurers have a motivation, it says, and you're supposed to create a motivation for your character, and there is nowhere to write it down on the character sheet. So how important is your motivation? There's some mythic archetypes stuff, and this is potentially hugely complicated and really rich, adding to the depth of the character. And it's thrown away on a single trait that might have, there's space on the sheet for maybe 30 characters to express your mythic archetype. There's no sense that less is more. There's no particular elegance. There's an awful lot. If you want to describe your character's personality, you need to take the personality trait as one of, I can't remember how many potential traits there are. There's a lot of traits. And if you are a new player, the section on how to describe, think about fleshing out a new character and thinking about who this person is, kicks off with, what do you eat? And I have never asked that question about a role-playing character before.
Wait.
Well, apart from I did have a Soliani banquet once, which was, I attended a Soliani banquet. I did not throw it. And it was one of my most memorable role-playing occasions. But it wasn't character generation.
I was going to say, in Cyberpunk, when we were talking about the gearbook for Cyberpunk Red, you were very impressed by the incorporation of food as a signifier of sort of economic class and status within the society. That was an implementation where it's like, okay, this shows stuff about your character, and showing stuff about your character matters and is important and is worthwhile.
Yeah. The comparisons to GURPS are pretty apt because I think EABA is trying to do, my comparison would be looking at, video games. If you follow video game development, there are two major pieces of software that a lot of video games use, the Unity game engine and the Unreal Engine. And I think this is sort of in the category of like, I want to be the Unity engine of role-playing games. And in terms of the sensibility of the game designer, one of the most illustrative pages of this is 2.8, the EABA universal chart, where it has
it
has a level and dice. You can compare damage and mass and speed and size and time and money and quantity and recovery and a turn modifier, like how fast you go, all in the same chart. 4 dice plus 2 is a little more or 4 dice plus 1 is equal to a rifle in terms of damage, or it's 250 kilograms, it's 32 meters a second, or 1.4 minutes. Before we get into the mechanics and sort of specific things, this is a game where you have an idea for a campaign and you like creating a very detailed RPG setting for your campaign, and you have an idea that doesn't quite fit an existing game. You want to make it like special and a little different, and you want to craft certain mechanics. You want to craft a very detailed game that really gives player a lot of like options, and there's mechanical depth. Obviously, you don't want to house rule 5th ed D&D or some other system for it. So this is the game for you. I've done it myself a couple of times. Like I tried to run a GURPS campaign using the Fallout setting, but with mass combat rules, and like I got several GURPS supplements. I read them all, and then it fell apart after one session. So I'm like, never again. But I understand the impulse.
I'm so sorry, man. We've all been there.
We've all been there. Yeah, we've all wanted like, oh, I have this idea. It's really cool. No other RPG does it right out of the box. So I'm going to like tinker around. I'm going to create my own thing that's special and unique, and the players will love it. And yeah, this is the game for that.
It's like when you're house shopping and you're like, oh man, what if the garage from that one was on this one, but with the roof for that third one? And you turn into sort of this deviant house pervert.
Yeah, it's mechanics of this game aren't even like, they don't even have like a list of powers, right? They have a sample power list, but they have rules for creating powers, and these powers can be like sci-fi or
it's a meta list.
Yeah, it's a meta list. And like same thing with vehicles. So you have to create your own vehicles, you have to create your own gear, but like they give you the mechanics to fairly create these important elements for your games, for your campaign. If this sounds interesting to you, and you want to have fair mechanics, and you don't like Fate and you don't like GURPS, definitely look at EABA. But like, how does EABA work?
Just to nip back one session there, when we were talking about Savage Worlds, we were talking about the GNS triangle from the days of the Fate, the gamist, narrativist, simulationist one. With regard to generic systems, we said Fate was probably the narrativist system, Savage Worlds was the gamist system, and GURPS would have been the simulationist one. within the confines of that piece of critical theory.
Mhm.
And EABA just takes that GURPS thing and just pushes it even further into the simulationist stuff.
Yeah.
This is a game that, and it's interesting that the other game that's gone really in this direction is Apocalypse World, which is very kind of narrativist and the powered by the apocalypse stuff, but stuff where the player characters say they want to do something and the GM needs to find out if that's going to work. The rules for it will be in EABA somewhere. They will be in the EABA rulebook.
Mhm.
And so as a GM, you are allowed to, if you don't mind spending the entire session flipping through the rulebook, you can play the game that way. It can be a very player-led session. And it occurred to me you could run a proper kind of sandbox world with this, with the players doing more or less whatever they want, and the GM going, yeah, that works. And here's the result. Except it's not providing narrative results; it's providing very numerical results, which tend to be kind of succeed or fail. Just one other thing as well. Sorry, I'm on a slow internet collection tonight.
Mhm.
You mentioned the EABA Universal Table. Now, when we talked about Christian's previous choice of game, the 007 role-playing game, we mocked it because a quarter of the character sheet is taken up with a table that you will need to resolve almost every rule. And EABA does exactly the same thing because a cut-down version of the Universal Table appears on the character sheet. It takes up something like a sixth of the entire space of a double-sided character sheet, and you will need to refer to it a great many times during the course of the game. I was really interested to see that because I can't think of that many games that actually include large tables on the character sheet. I almost designed one in the mid-90s and then thought better of it.
Well,
Yeah.
something. This is BTRC, right?
Yes.
Is the technical? Yep, there it is. That is Greg Porter's company.
Blacksburg Tactical
Tactical Simulation. Yeah.
Tactical Research Center. Yeah. BTRC.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a tell, right? That's just truth in advertising. It's like, if you want a tactical simulation game, why not get it from the Tactical Simulation Center?
Mm-hmm.
He ain't lying, people. This is it is what it says on the tin. And so if you don't want a tactical simulation, don't buy the tactical simulation. If you do want a tactical simulation and want to see a really interesting one, well, maybe check this out. I think of it in the context of the Fantasy Heartbreaker, to talk about Forge stuff and Ron Edwards stuff again, right? And his concept of the Fantasy Heartbreaker was, and the original one, it's sort of the phrase has sort of been watered down to mean any fantasy game other than D&D that's D&D like.
Yeah.
He used it more specifically to say that, there were all these games that were very D&D like, except they had one innovation that they focused on. And it could be like, it's D&D, but it has a meta currency, or it's D&D, but spells are freeform, and he's like, and there was always one brilliant thing stabbed through the B grade clone of D&D. And EABA is not that, but it does feel in many ways as a design reaction, as if Porter has been looking at rules for probably as long as tabletop role-playing games have existed and saying, no, that could be done better. This could be done better. Why don't we have a universal standard? And so EABA, it's like, what if everything was the brilliant innovation from a Fantasy Heartbreaker, which sounds great on paper, but man, things are fundamental for a reason. And having to reinvent every wheel on the car is a big challenge. I have a feeling, I haven't tried to run EABA. I get the sensation that if you're really good at it, this thing's amazing, but that it is very, very, very hard to be very good at it. Does that seem fair to you guys?
I don't think it does not seem like it would take some time. I don't think it would be very hard to learn because it's based on a very solid mechanical basis, and everything's just a different like case use of these mechanics. So let me first go over the core mechanics of this game, which again, this does feel like an attempt to make what if instead of Fantasy Heartbreaker but for D&D but for GURPS, but also like this is competently made. This is very well made and very well executed. And looking at BTRC's drive-through RPG page, they have like 63 products on there. So clearly Greg's was like make a product line on it. Core mechanic is that you roll a pool of dice, D6s, and you pick your 3 best, and you would get fractional bonuses, depending on what and the difficulty number, like an average roll you would need a 7 to succeed on. Now the trick is if you say have a pool of, you could be rolling more than 3 dice and you only pick the 3 best. So, but one thing you can do is if you can always sacrifice a die to get a flat +2 bonus. So if you're rolling 8d6, you could just sacrifice 5 dice to get +10, and you're rolling 3d6 +10, which gives you a minimum roll of a 13, right? Which is a formidable difficulty. Dice and penalties, if you have something that is internal to you that'll affect the number of dice you roll, and things that are external to you will affect the difficulty of the task, the target number you have to reach. Everything's built on that. Everything is like a different case or a different variation of this same mechanic. And again, which is a lot like GURPS, which is 3d6 roll under, a given number. This is 3d up to, well, you're rolling a pool of dice and you're trying to get a certain target number or higher. I think it would be pretty easy to like start out with some, this would be the kind of game you introduce mechanics with each session. You do basic skill tests the first session, then you do range combat after a session, then vehicle combat after 5 sessions, and add superpowers or high-tech stuff or magic or whatever it is you want to add as the campaign goes on. There's a lot of rules, but you can ignore a lot of them if they don't matter for your campaign. I think that's the appeal to it, is that it's so granular that you can easily determine what you want to add in and what not. But like, it's all based on rolling a pool of dice, keep your 3 best one, and sacrifice dice to get a flat +2 bonus.
And I respect the idea of, it's just you're never going to add together more than 3 dice, because my gut reaction to that was, well, yeah, most gamers have played so much D&D so many times and made so many characters that many of us could probably still total up 3d6 instantly after being kicked in the head by a mule. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, add 3 dice together, and the trade dice in for bonuses. I'm like, yes, this is smart because it cuts down on the handling time problem, which a lot of games that are exciting on the page because you get to roll tons and tons of dice slow to a crawl on the table because you have to then add up tons and tons of dice, which is a problem we've discussed before. Mm-hmm. And, Greg Porter comes along and is like, oh, well, let's just slay that dragon with, oh, no, it's the 3 highest. And you can trade all the dice you don't need. Didn't he do the math? And he's like, yeah, what's your best option is rolling 5 dice and turning everything else into bonuses.
Yeah, it's actually facing the universal chart. One thing that the PDF also does is that there are different colored little sidebars. Green ones, if you're new to role-playing, read these. If you're an experienced role player, read these. And blue, if you love details, you'll love these. And it's a red bar. Here's the math. Here's the probability of like, if you're going for difficulty 5, 2 dice plus 2 will give you 83% chance of succeeding, and so on, so on and so forth. He understands the mathematics and has weighed it quite carefully. So it's a well considered mechanical system. Yeah.
Yes. If there's one thing you can rely on with a Greg Porter design, it's that he's done the math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that he would probably hear that and be like, yes, this is my legacy. So, yeah, good on him for it. He knows exactly what he wants to do, and he is not wasting anybody's time trying to do anything he doesn't want. Mm-hmm. I mean, this does look like a tightly machined Swiss watch of a system where everything clicks together. Mm-hmm. And, and he says, oh, only take what you want, which is something I've done. Rain is modular. It's like, okay, if you're not doing a rogue game where you're all running from the cops every session, You probably don't need the advanced, complicated chase rules, but you might want them if you're doing that. If you're not going out to the sea, you don't need the boat rules.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are, you want them. And he does the same thing here. He's like, don't try to eat the whole buffet. Just take some stuff on your plate, and then if you finish that, come back. So, to be fair, he says is designed to fit your desired level of detail, but
at the same time, you described it. It's a tightly machined Swiss watch. I actually think it's a very big Swiss watch with enormous quantities of clockwork. But the thing about that, and I think it's a very adept analogy, clockwork's all integrated. It's difficult to just take stuff out because it all kind of fits together. And, and the combat system is extremely complicated. I did not read all the rules in depth, I have to admit. I can only take so much of this stuff. I actually stopped reading the rules on page 14, where I came across the sentence volume. The volume in hexagons, bracket 1 hexagon equals 0.75 cubic meters, brackets, of a sphere is about 3 times the radius level minus 1. And I just thought, I'm going to skim the mechanics from here.
Yeah.
But
you kind of went down a little rabbit hole there.
It's page 14. Page 14 of a 320-page book. But yeah, the combat system, it begins, combat and conflict in EABA is fairly straightforward, says the first line of the 24-page basic combat chapter, which is then followed by advanced combat, which is another 45 pages, and not including the mass combat rules, which you'll then find in the GM section further on. And all of this stuff is fairly tightly integrated. And what you were saying, Ross, about it being the stuff from Fantasy Heartbreakers, the good ideas. When I teach game design, one of the principles I tell people is if you've got a mechanic and you really love, but the rest of the design is kind of grating around it, and you take the bit you love out because it is breaking the rest of the design. And I felt there was some of the stuff in here. There were a lot of really interesting ideas, and I'm not sure all of them fitted. But for me, the coolest idea, or the idea that I came across and thought, this is really cool, and it's integral to combat, which is that not all combat rounds are the same length. Your first combat round is 1 second, and then the next one is 2 seconds, and then 4 seconds, and so on. So the longer a combat lasts in game terms, it's growing exponentially longer in narrative terms. And that's really clever and should work really well, I thought. And then I got to the example of play. And normally I talk a lot about examples of play, and this book is rich in examples of play in the colored sidebars. And he breaks down, and this is such a good idea. He takes that scene from The Matrix, and if you need to ask which scene you haven't watched The Matrix enough, the lobby scene from The Matrix, surely one of the definitive pieces of cinematic combat until the John Wick movies came along. And he says it's 2 minutes, 30 seconds on screen. In game world time, it runs in about 4 minutes. That's 8 rounds of combat, and it takes him 12 pages to describe the combat. Now, some years ago, I published a game called Nobilis. It was infamous for having a 20-page example of play, and that covered an entire scenario. 12 pages for a 2 minute, 30-second combat. This is there's not much elegance here. There's a great deal of sophistication. There's a great deal of clever and well-integrated mechanics, but it is not elegant.
It is not, because I think your comment about the hexagon with the volume of the sphere and everything like that. And again, the universal chart. This is a game where the people who are in your D&D campaign were like, well, if we cast Cloud Kill and it creates this much area volume of gas, we can feed it into the dungeon, and we should be able to clear out 2 levels of the dungeon because we know approximately how big the dungeon is. And it's, the people who turn, a dungeon crawling session into a word problem on an engineering test. And this is the same kind of appeal, is the people who really they don't want to hand wave things. They don't want to have narrative. They want to be able to solve difficult problems through their cleverness or not. I do really like I was going to mention the turn modifier too. Like, the doubling of time with each turn. So like 10 rounds of combat is 16 minutes. And yeah, it's a very that's how a lot of real like actual combat works out. It's very quick in the beginning, and then it slows down as people who are still alive are like,
reach a steady state.
Yeah, and they're in cover or they're tired and they're a little wary, and they watch half their numbers get picked off in the first minutes, and maybe they're a little more cautious. Or
as soon as James said there was one idea that really caught my eye, I'm like, this is going to be, what was the name of it? Variable combat time.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what it made me think of was the escalation die in 13th Age.
Yeah.
And this is a hyper simulationist, much more complicated gesture at the same outcome. And the outcome, the desired outcome of both the escalation die and this is, as the combat keeps going, we don't want it to bog down. We want it to get cooler and more interesting as it goes on, instead of getting more exhausting and tiring as it goes on. So the escalation die answer to that is, oh, yeah, first round of combat, get a +1 to your damage. Second round, +2.
Mm-hmm.
Up to sixth round, +6. Kick their asses, son. And the answer here is, first round of combat, everything is panic time. Second round of combat, but, it escalates to the point where it's like, okay, I now am, if I take one action, I can stack up all these bonuses on it because I have the time advantage from the giant chart that lets me factor in, okay, I am not firing as I dive into cover with bullets spanging off the concrete around me. I am now crouched behind cover, taking my time, controlling my breathing, dialing in, and taking a good shot instead of a crazy shot.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm sure that when Greg Porter runs this, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I could run it amazingly. Or if I could, it would take some time and effort to extract the virtues from it to make it work well. A lot of the games I play, I'm like, I want the equivalent of a Toyota Corolla that will get me to the grocery store and back without requiring too much gas. And this is like a Formula One racer, where if you are not hyper focused on it, you're going to go into the neighbor's house and explode.
Well, I think that's if you try and run it with all the systems, right? Using the advanced combat from the very start. I think this is a very scalable system, like I said earlier, in that
which was a goal.
Sure. Yeah. You start out with just basic task resolution and basic combat stuff. And as everyone gets familiar with it, you add more mechanics, more complexity to increase the challenge. If you want the Toyota Corolla, it's all about like, well, what's the kind of game you want to run? Do you want to run a cozy mystery where it's about collaborative storytelling and there's no real puzzle to solve? Okay, well, Brindlewood Bay. Or if you want like medieval magic with historical accuracy, well, Ars Magica. But like, if it's a concept that doesn't fit an existing game, then you're like, well, I want a robust game engine that's going to be fair and it's not as swingy as, say, like most D20 systems. Or so then you can use EABA, because like I could just create the custom. If there are any supernatural things, you can run like you're just normal people. You're just like detectives, and it's the 1970s, and you're investigating crime, and that's it. We're no meta currency. You're just doing this, and we'll go on from there. But like,
we're just going to have some specialized rules for how cool your 70s detective mustache is.
I mean, that would be a power, right? You could design that in the power system. That would be pretty easy to do. Yeah, I think.
Mustache Man, the game.
Yeah.
The Mustache Detectives. Okay, that's our next Kickstarter, gang. The Mustache Detectives.
Yeah. We could have, sunglasses with improved accuracy for shooting, and like, mustaches of charisma, basically. It's very easy to do once you use a hex map for combat too.
I will tell you the part that broke my poor little English major brain, though, was, and this isn't even complicated. It's just, I made a character, right? You know how I like to make characters for this.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make a grand level heroic superhero. And so, yeah, I came up with someone who's pretty good at brawling and surprisingly smart and healthy. And I'm like, I'm just going to give him flight and invisibility. Go. You've got attributes, skills, traits, and powers. And there are 3 different economies you use to buy these things. There are attribute points you use to buy attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Skill points you use to buy skill points. And furthermore, no attribute can be more than 3 higher than the next shortest one down. And I'm like, wait, where do you start? And it feels like you will never just assign your points. You will have to assign 1 point and then be like, okay, so that's my highest one. So the next lowest one down has to be this. And it feels like creating a character is homework and not like the good homework where you're kind of secretly into it.
That's dependent, right? Like, like some gamers really love these kind of crunchy, super in-depth character creation systems.
And I mean, it doesn't feel like there is a broken degenerate combo meta strategy where it's like, oh yeah, man, if you just pick the one hand and then missing a finger, if you pick the one-armed,
well, you don't know what your characters are going to be doing. There's no setting, so it's like, is it going to be medieval politics? You're all burghers trying to get one over the lord, or you did 1970s detectives solving crime.
Well, but you would know. Your GM would tell you.
You would. You would hope your GM would tell you. Your GM could fake you out completely. Yeah, you thought you were going to be 70s cops, but look, it's cyberpunk. And yes, and everything you use runs on transistors. But
man, can you imagine the cyber stash? It would be like
again easily statted out in this system.
It would be fiber optic and just this rainbow fringe.
You beat me to fiber optic. There you go. Yeah, but it's very much a character generation system for people who believe characters should be expressed as numbers rather than as words. There's almost no space and almost no systems there for coming up with your background, your loved ones, your origins, your hopes, your dreams. There's a very, very small section right at the top of the sheet. Yeah, the name background goals. You get one line. It's like half the width of the sheet. One line for your background and a similar length for your goals. And goals is great. Goals, Ghostbusters had, I think there were 5 different goals you could choose. Money, soulless science, fame, sex, and I forget the other one. And for Ghostbusters, that works brilliantly. But for a character who's, supposed to be this fleshed out and complicated is the word that keeps coming to mind when we're talking about EABA, that really doesn't feel like very much. The whole system, particularly character generation, is a min-maxer's dream. If you love getting into the guts of the engine of a game and really tinkering with the bits and seeing how you can squeeze every last fraction of a dice modifier out of it, you are going to go ape crazy for this. It's so rich for that kind of roleplay.
I don't know that I agree with that. Because, what a min-maxer wants, in my experience, is to find the bargain, right? They're the rules effectiveness bargain hunters, where it's like, okay, clearly the rules in my GM meant for this skill to cover X, Y, and Z, but I've found a lawyerly loophole where it can cover X, Y, Z, and also C and D. So now when I pump this up, I won't have to put anything else into C and D, and then I can buy more of this thing that I'm sort of off-brand using it. Porter seems to be like, no, you are not going to do that. You are not going to find the broken bit in here that allows you to play Thor while everyone else is Daredevil. Sorry.
There's a lot of there's a lot of description later half talking about like vehicles and but here's all the different time periods you can be in. And it's very covering every angle. And there's this, again, trying to be the end all be all of role playing games. And so it doesn't quite, you have to go the last mile yourself to really get that unique flavor. You're going to have to do a bit of work to create custom rules for your 1970s cool cop with the cool mustache game or whatever it is.
But you could.
You have the
technology.
Yeah, you do have the technology. and this kind of goes in, like, you can kind of see this philosophy approach, like in the game mastering chapter, where Greg has assembled a lot of general good advice. This book is worth reading just for the GM advice, because it's stuff that, is well known to us, but like maybe it's good to get a refresher. But like there are some bits that kind of show the biases towards engineering and like combat or like technical aspects versus storytelling. There's one page on here that sort of gets me, which is the 36 plots written in 1913 as a guide to all the plots and dramatic works, and it just lists them as like one table, on half a
which
page.
Doesn't
and
even include all of them. Yeah.
No, yeah, and it's also like for fiction, not for interactive games, which have a different set of like plots that really work.
I mean, what are the basic plots of role playing? We're going to steal this thing, or we're going to kill this guy, or we're going to explore how bad we feel about the guys we killed and the things we stole.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
yeah.
Or as Aristotle would say, man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it. And yet at the same time, he's referring to the characters, the player characters, as adventurers. A word he uses more than once, specifically in the character generation section, and refers to the activity that they will be undertaking as adventuring. Mm-hmm. And that's taking us straight back to the 1970s and D&D style adventures, because he talks about a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of the player facing stuff is very tightly rulesy. The GM stuff is a lot more kind of woolly, and he cites designers who he cites and quotes specifically, including our own Mr. Stolze.
Yay!
And Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. But most of them are kind of, bearing in mind the first edition of this came out in 2003, I think, or 2002. Mm-hmm. They were kind of the young Turks of the scene around then. He quotes Luke Crane. He quotes Jonathan Tweed, who admittedly had been a Turk in the 90s and by that point had done D&D 3E. But it's those kind of people. But he doesn't talk really about adventure structure. He doesn't talk about, twanging on players' heartstrings or how to engage them emotionally or building or how a character is changed by their experiences, except in experience points. It's very old school.
I don't think he's interested in that. I think that he regards those as and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but the examination of the text suggests to me that he would regard that stuff as emergent qualities of play. Those are things that happen at the table. Yes. What the game is for is to produce a series of puzzles and challenges, and that what arises from that within the players that's the gravy on the biscuit. But the main meal is the series of challenges, the series of simulationist puzzles.
Yes, I think that's very fair.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Or if you treat like advanced combat, killing everybody in the lobby of the Matrix as a, it is kind of a challenge. It is kind of a puzzle. How many can you kill before you get clipped yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. There's two of you. There's
James, you said the word that, stuck out at you was adventure. Guess which word stuck out for me?
Oh, gosh, I wonder.
Yeah,
will by any chance? Or would?
Because he uses it 843 times. Aww. Just got to get that in there. Just got to.
To be fair, that's one of the attributes is will. So,
okay.
Yeah. Strength, agility, awareness, will, health, and fate are the attributes. So.
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah,
he's not only using it for that.
I know. I'm just.
But
some of those are the game stat. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so he had a quote in there. Let me see if I can find it. A lot of role playing is about how characters. He said players deal with chance, and I'm like, let's change that to characters. Mm-hmm. A lot of role playing is about how they deal with chance, and a lot of GMing is about how you deal with players. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is not his first rodeo, is it? That struck me as a keen insight. I liked that. And the bit on 810 about playing favorites and the bit about too clever on 811. By the way, what is this numbering system? Because I remember seeing it in like Starfleet battles.
Yeah, it's a very technical manual style of like chapter, point, and then subsection. But I mean, the PDF will list page 286 out of 320, but it says 8.11 on the actual PDF.
Yeah, so it's chapter 8, page 11 within chapter 8. It's nowhere near as bad as things used to be in the days of SBI and Avalon Hill's numbering, where every paragraph and subparagraph had their own number. So you could go to a specific rule very, very quickly, but at the same time, it was not an easy or pleasant read. It's idiosyncratic. I think one of the key words that comes to me for describing it's idiosyncratic. It is very much for a particular style of role player. And I'm in fact quite glad to discover from its sales figures on drive-through, that Greg has an audience and still has an audience that are following. He has forums on his own website in which they continue to discuss and analyze and build on the game. I'm always delighted to find that these kind of subgroups and subgenres of particular games continue to exist and continue to thrive. It is absolutely not my style of role play.
After the GM advice, you sort of have the gear section, which describes how you can create your own gear, and they have examples of historical era weapons and sci-fi weapons to give you sort of a framework to create your own items, your own gear thing. And then it is an open game license system. It has its own open supplemental license system.
So we could just make mustache detectives.
You could just, you make your own EABA.
Greg says we, Ross says you.
Yeah. I have this own game I'm working on, Greg. Yeah, EABA and Hutch. Oh, there we go.
James from the top rope.
Yeah.
Starskeeper and Hutch, even.
Oh, yeah. From downtown. Again, this was designed as a framework for supplements and things to sort of focus it down and give it. Greg Porter has created multiple settings and supplements for it.
Did you guys look at any of those?
I briefly did. A couple of them came with PDF that we got.
Yeah. The project is such a fascinating idea. It's weird to me that it is in this hyper-simulationist system. The premise of the project is Earth's doomed. Big meteorite's coming. It's going to go through Earth like a bullet through a watermelon. And so it's Mars, baby. We have all the money in the world. We are building, we're trying to seed humanity to Mars to restart on a much, 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 much worse world. But, it's only going to be much, 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 much worse for a little while longer. Everyone on Earth pretty much going to get written off. And so you are the scientists building the rocket, and every scientist who has been dragooned into this starts with a 10% chance of being one of the people who gets to go on the rocket to Mars. Talk about your bias towards engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your activities during play determine whether your odds go up or your odds go down. But they can only go up and down so much because an 11% chance is such a tremendous achievement that your TikTok channel has people following you to find out how you're gaming the system of getting the golden ticket. I read that. I'm like, man, that's a super intense, emotionally rich setting. But is EABA the fit for it?
If you treat it as an engineering problem that it can be objectively solved, then yeah. It's not a game about rich introspection. There are introspection mechanics, but it's not there are games we've talked about that are more robust in that, like the Quiet Year. You could do a modified Quiet Year with that.
I feel like what that needs is to be a weekend LARP and just, okay, make everyone like you enough to want to send you to space, and everybody agonize about how 99% of the people you've ever met in your life are going to die in the fire. That was cool. GREP was a fascinating idea, which is aliens crash and their nanotechnology infects Earth, but their nanotechnology was itself hacked. It was meant to be, oh, no, only aliens with our biology can use this nanotech. But some other aliens hacked it. So it's no, it's anybody who really can visualize a thing enough can make that thing if they have the ingredients for the thing. So it's, oh, yeah, anybody who who has the time, effort, and all this can turn a broken down car into a brand new car. Or, anybody who understands how a gun works can make one out of crap you could throw in a pot on your stove. And Porter very carefully thinks about, okay, what are the outcomes of that? I'm trying to remember what it is that decimates like 1/8 of the human race with this. It's in many ways a post-apocalyptic scenario. And again, all engineering problems all the time.
Yeah. And there's clearly a market for it.
So yeah, those come in. And should I go off on my spiel about the youth of gaming as an enterprise? Because we talked about this before a little bit, but I don't want to monopolize the pod.
Go for it.
When the three of us were just children, gaming was pretty much born. I was born in 1970, so I have grown up right alongside this folk art behavior we call tabletop role-playing games. And it seems very mature, but I don't think it is. I don't think that there are people who feel like we are at the end of history for gaming, that we have found the one system you need and that nothing could ever improve on D20. Or, there are people who are like, nothing can ever improve on Fate. Or there are people who are nothing will ever improve on Powered by the Apocalypse. But while I wouldn't be astonished if people are still playing versions of those systems in 50 years, I would be astonished if there was nothing radically different, new, and innovative. That right now, we are still in the very early stages of this evolving thing. And EABA is in many ways an offshoot that Porter did not chase trends. Porter did not do what he thought would be popular just because he thought it would be popular. Porter did what he thought was the mechanic that needed to exist. The thing he thought, this can be better, and the way it can be better is EABA. Clearly, enough people believe him, which doesn't mean that it's the best system ever. It means that it's a system that works for what a lot of people want to do. And to me, it seemed like a fascinating alternate path. It's not hard to imagine a alternate present where EABA took off instead of D&D 3rd edition, and where the demographic of gaming is consequently really, really different.
I don't think it has
if
that.
EABA, okay, here we go. Let me interrupt you there,
Sure.
Ross. Imagine if EABA had broken wide the way Vampire broken wide instead, the way Vampire broke wide instead of Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
If instead of all these goth theater kid types like me, you got a bunch of mathy problem solving chess club types. I'm just saying the demographic would be fascinatingly different.
Well, I think one, it would have to come out like 20 years earlier. I think the closest thing to EABA is GURPS, and GURPS, came out in the 80s, saturating the market as much as it could. And it's the GURPS we know and, we know today. The thing about D&D and vampires, there's strong narrative hooks that sell the game before people learn about mechanics. Now, if EABA had some sort of setting that was that really hooked people, then we'd probably it might have had a chance. I know I'm going to use EABA in the future when I'm talking like to a patron or someone who's like, oh, I want to make a universal RPG that'll do anything. Okay, is it at least as well engineered as EABA? No? Well, maybe you should consider because EABA exists, GURPS exists, Fate exists. Like, what can you do that these games don't offer? A game for a particular kind of gamer, the kind of gamers used to making everything on his own, like, and it's not for everyone because, most people think of narrative, who am I and what am I doing? Before they think, oh, that's a really cool dice pool mechanic, and it doesn't quite. Oh, it has everything I need to engineer to craft my own homebrew system or setting. So I admire it. I don't think I'll pick it up because, again, I tried to run a GURPS campaign with all the trimmings and lots of cool stuff, and it fell apart after one session. And I just looked at it as like, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to risk spending many hours setting something up only for it to fall apart in the first session. I'll just use pre-made systems and maybe modify them a little and go from there. And I've been much happier as a GM.
Oh shit, man! Is this your origin story?
No,
is this why you're the guy who's?
No, I read this is like well into RPR. This is like sometime in the 2010s when I did the Fallout GURPS thing. And because I've always wanted to do a campaign with big mass combat and players, empire building and all that jazz. But like, and I know Rain exists, and but I wanted to try GURPS.
I said nothing. I said
I know
nothing.
But So
I was thinking it though.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I was looking at this, and I went back. In fact, because back in the days of Hogshead Publishing, we used to have a copy of Core or Corpse, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Mm-hmm. Greg's previous generic role-playing system on the shelves, and it was pretty tight. It was not a thick volume by any means. It was another 6 attribute thing, but it was D10 based. It did the job. It was fast. It covered an awful lot of stuff. It didn't feel over mechanical. It wasn't trying to be everything. It said it couldn't deal well with humans with ridiculous powers or giant monsters or giant robots or anything like that. But if you were basically human, it was a really nice, tight system. And I could see something like that taking off, and then EABA becoming essentially the AD&D version of Corpse. And I'm spinning out narratives in my head about, well, what if a meteorite in 2004 near missed the Earth, and suddenly people went, holy shit, what if it had hit us? And, they're the next time. And suddenly everyone's buying the project, and because they're buying the project, they're buying EABA. I think, it could have happened. And we could have actually branched off on a different direction. Because, and I think we've said this a couple of times, it is worth stressing, Greg is a very skilled, very practiced, very experienced game designer. Mm-hmm. And it really shows through. Yes, this is not a game to my taste. I don't think it's particularly to any of our tastes around this particular virtual table. But if this is the kind of thing you like, you would really like this. This is a very meaty, complete, simulationist piece of role-play design. There's not very much fat on its bones. It's mostly muscle.
That's a good one.
And if you like your role play with where you know the probability of making a dice roll before you make it, and you don't mind the fact that there is a whopping great table on your character sheet, then have a look at it. It's $20. That's really not very much money for a game
of 300 and some pages.
Well, it's also one book as opposed to like 2 or 3 books for GURPS 4E, right? Like it's a more streamlined package than GURPS. So if you want, like, I want my game in a very particular way, and I don't like GURPS, or I don't want to spend all that money for 3 or 4 or more GURPS books, this is a good alternative. So I think that's I think its main appeal. It's for people who want to, like, I'm not satisfied with store-bought anything. I have to customize it just to the way I like it. And like, this is it. This is how you can create whatever exact little story or RPG that you want. And you can even publish it with its open supplemental license, I suppose. Go. I think that kind of summarizes EABA. So it's a fascinating game.
I could keep talking for at least another hour about it. I have huge amounts of notes on the book, some of which are quite rude. Actually, there are bits of it that I did not get on with at all. As I say, I mostly skimmed the mechanics. The layout is flat out weird. It's a 2-column layout, and the first line of the second column is always one line higher than the top of the first column.
Oh yeah.
Why would you do that? There's some horrible kind of clip art stuff which just looks very cheap, and then there's full pages by, I believe, Paul Bourne, who was the artist on Cold City and A State, and which are fantastic British, really beautifully produced games from about 20-25 years ago.
I can tell you why the columns are uneven, James.
Why are the columns?
It's because every page has the EABA 2.0 logo hanging down.
Yes.
And every page on the other corner has the die.
And why?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The logo is in the left side of each page, and that intrudes on the text.
Yes, but that's bad. That's bad page design.
You could have just shrunk it down. You could have made the logo smaller.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
that's
Or
true.
do you need the name of the role-playing game on every single page?
The layout
of
is
the
very
role-playing game?
It's very engineering textbook. Like it is extremely utilitarian in its design. And yeah, lots of clip art, lots of stock art, and with occasional really good pieces. But mostly all the really nice pieces are like science fiction in theme, it looks like. Yeah. So
I'll tell you, I don't think the cover is doing it any favors. The cover is well done, but it's just a
it's a
sort of science fiction-y landscape with no people.
Yeah.
Or are there even... Okay, I got to go to page 0.
Mhm.
I'm
Cover.
guessing it looks like, I mean, apart from the fact that there are birds in it, it does look like a whole bunch of rocks approaching Earth at great speed.
Oh yeah, like an
I'm guessing
asteroid,
it's
like the
to do with-
asteroid
Is that
from
what
the
it is?
project. Yeah.
I mean,
So-
that would be my guess, but he doesn't explain. And then there's some weird kind of geometric effects around the edge. Like much of this, there's some of it that looks kind of futuristic, and there's some of it that feels like 15 years before its publication date.
Mhm.
There's a couple of throwbacks in there, but it's great. He's doing his own thing, and that is the great thing about the role-playing market. Anyone can publish anything they want and talk about it online, and they may well find an audience.
Mhm.
And that's great.
Yeah.
That's fair. This is the kind of game that where you can engineer it exactly how you want. This is the game for you. And the turn and I really do like the turn modifier system like that. That I really like. Yeah, the doubling of time again. That
It's really smart. It's one of those, you read it and it's like, why have I not seen this before?
This feels like one of those things that a couple other people are going to try and do some really interesting stuff with, and hopefully give Porter the credit.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's EABA. Thank you again, Christian, for curating this episode. This
Many
is a very good
thanks.
discussion.
Can I just say,
Sure.
I don't necessarily agree with all of Christian's tastes in role-playing games, but every title he's given us to look at has been fascinating to talk about. I have really enjoyed these episodes.
100%. 100%.
He pulls very good things out of us, doesn't he?
Thanks, Christian.
I remember that first one, Heroes of the Water Margin.
Outlaws of the Water Margin.
Outlaws of the Water Margin. I've never heard about this, and I'm going, I have a playtest credit.
Yeah.
That was
that was great. That was great. Interesting that, one of the major settings for EVA is about space, because we're going to be back in space for our next episode. We are going to be looking at a campaign, a mega dungeon of sorts, Mothership Gradient Descent. It is
Mothership.
Yeah, Mothership adventure module / campaign setting of a space station run by a rogue AI, and there are a lot of custom mechanics for this adventure about like, are you who you think you are, or are you actually a replicant / android who's been body snatched from the party, or maybe you're just coming back home. There's a lot of interesting mechanics for it, and it's certainly a interesting. Also, in terms of its graphic design, its art, and so yeah, it'll be a very fun book to look at. So, and again, thank you all for listening to this episode. Be sure to check out ludonarrativedissidents.com, where you can join our Discord and talk about this if you have some thoughts on EVA or versus GURPS or other universal systems. And but yeah, we'll be talking to you next episode. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.